Hi, good morning, everyone. This is Amy Hamilton, and I am here live with Amber Stevens. Amber is a really early person. She is out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and it is so phenomenal to have her today. This is 24 authors in 12 hours, and it's 6:30 Colorado time. Amber, I'm so happy you're here. She's here to talk about her book. It is Food, Feelings, and Freedom. And Amber, my first question for you is what inspired you to write the book?
What inspired me? Thank you. And this is a little interesting of the chat and talk here. So, what inspired me with my book is really my own story to begin with, and then working with my clients and seeing similar ordeals and issues showing up in their lives. And I realized as I was going through my own journey that I wasn't a healthy person. I was living a very healthy life, a healthy career, but I myself was really struggling. And I started having some serious health problems to the point where I started going unconscious. I was fainting, no idea why. And none of my doctors had really any idea. Went and saw all the specialists. And finally, the cardiologist said, well, the best we can guess is that you have something called vasovagal syncope, which syncope is a fancy word for fainting, and vasovagal is referring to the vagus nerve. So I wanted to know everything about this, what was happening. There was no solution for me, and I certainly didn't want to keep fainting, right? So I looked into it, and I realized again and again and again that the vagus nerve is really closely tied to stress. And sure enough, I had to take a close look in the mirror and realize that, yeah, I am a big bundle of stress right now in my life, and it's showing up in my body because I wasn't slowing down and paying attention to myself. My body was forcing me to stop. So in that moment, really being aware of who I am, I started looking into the areas of my life that I could change and that could adapt. And I had this real aha moment where I went, oh my gosh, I'm an emotional eater. And it had never occurred to me that I was because, number one, I wasn't overweight. And in my brain, and I think a large part of society, emotional eaters are always shown as a stereotypical person who is downing ice cream at midnight, and they're hiding the bag of cookies in their bedroom. This wasn't me. But I absolutely was using food, and not the best foods, to cope with the stress and the distress that I was feeling in my life. And then that on my journey to resolve that, I discovered mindfulness. And I dove headfirst into what is mindfulness and realized that there's this whole other way of eating called mindful eating. And it's really what helped me to overcome my emotional eating. And I said, I have to bring this out to the rest of the world. It was a complete 180 of how I was learning to feed myself, really. And so I took everything that I learned and I took the things that worked with my clients and I put them into this book and just really hope that, I'm living it and that my passion for overcoming this emotional eating tie and can really help others out there. So that was really just the inspiration behind it, was in my pursuit to bring what I know out into the world.
Thank you so much for that, Amber. I think that's really some great points. And so, people out there, Amber and I had a lot of difficulty this morning. We don't know why. We did a test before, and it appears that Amber and I cannot hear each other. So, we are actually chatting back and forth. And what we're hoping is those of you on the live stream can hear me and Amber at the same time, but we can actually not hear each other. So, it's a bit of a challenge. We are having a wonderful time, though. And our next challenge for Amber is for the authors out there. How did you stay motivated? And that's a really hard thing to do as an author, is to keep grinding
Staying
through.
motivated, yeah. Actually for me, the writing part is what came pretty easy. I lived the experience. I was ready. I knew what I wanted to say. I actually have a degree in journalism. And so the writing part, I knew how I wanted to structure it. I knew that I wanted the book to be something that could be either read from front to back, or it could be in little quick bites. I was a busy person. Everybody's busy. I want people to be able to take it and just say, okay, I have time for one little chapter, because that's what I used to do with my books. So it can be broken down in any way. So I stayed motivated by just keeping my reader in mind and trying to think, okay, how can I best help them by getting this information? And so breaking down the science into reasonable, just what you need to know kind of bits, not long diatribes about any one area, just the kind of hard and fast. This is what you can do to help. So the entire writing process actually only took about 3 months. And it was all the stuff afterwards that I had to stay motivated for, finding an editor, finding a designer, getting it published. Those pieces were kind of, the nuts and bolts of it. And really, my passion was in writing and getting the content out there. So I think one thing that did really help me was connecting with a program called Brain.fm, which goes in and talks to your brain with beats. And they have a focus setting. And I would plug in my headphones. I'd turn on that focus setting for 1 or 2 hours, whatever I had time for. And it really did just get me in the zone and keep me right on track. So little tips or little tricks that you can find that maybe tricks you into staying focused on your work is really helpful in the process.
Thank you so much, Amber. And just by the way, in the comment section, people say they can hear both of us. So we're just going to continue this dialogue. And even though it's a little bit interesting from our perspective, I'm sure we're going to laugh about this later. This book festival, I wanted to do it because when you walk around, there's so much to the fact that you can touch and you can feel the book, And right now during COVID, we can't do that. We can't go out. So this is really an authors helping authors event. And I wanted to just share Amber's story because it's really powerful. And so, Amber, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, what are your tips for old tales and things we hear about eating? So, these would be things like, you have to clear your plate, or you have to eat breakfast, all those kinds
what
of
are the things about eating? So, I hear so many things that have become not exactly true anymore. So, I think in my time when we were growing up, there was always you need to eat everything off your plate, right? You need to clear it off. Don't waste the food. Just, make sure that you clear off your plate. And with mindful eating approaches, that's not the mind frame that you want to take. Mindful eating is really about listening to your body, honoring your hunger and your fullness cues that come through. So eating just because of what your eyes tell you is a serving is not accurate. And I'll point out that as more kind of maybe the bigger myth, the old tale, is the serving size. So serving size over the years, especially in restaurants and fast food places, they have increased time and time again. I think at McDonald's, McDonald's was one of the first fast food restaurants that came out. Their burgers really were just a quarter pound of meat. And over the years, they became this bigger, Big Mac and all this kind of stuff. And then we have the Whopper that came out, and our serving sizes got really big. And in restaurants, there's almost this idea of, we want to serve you a big amount of food, right? We want to give you that value. And unfortunately, our eyes tell our brain that, well, I ordered a burrito, so that must be the serving size of a burrito. But it's probably not an accurate serving size for what our body needs, and especially for how hungry we are at that time. So that idea of you have to clean the food off of your plate doesn't serve your body in the long run. You really should be paying attention to, I'm actually only this hungry, and I can take the rest of that burrito home and I can have it for another meal. So that's probably one of the biggest ones that I see often is, what is that serving size?
That is a really great tip.
Out is that food is our enemy. I love food. I love it. I eat everything under the sun. But when it comes to emotional eating, we're all emotional people. Hopefully you all have emotions, and you're going to eat for emotional reasons. The only concern there is when the emotions drive your eating choices. And when we get in this unbalanced state of eating, that leads us typically into dieting. And then we try dieting for a little while and then we stop. And then we try a new diet because maybe that one will work. And then we stop. And then we hear about how gluten is terrible. And so we go off gluten. And then, sugar's terrible. And then fat's terrible. And eggs are terrible. And milk's terrible. Everything is apparently evil at some point in time, but it's really not. Food really is our friend, or it wants to be. What happens is that when we cut out drastically, we cut out all carbs or we cut out all sugars, we're kind of shocking our system into new ways of trying to get the energy and resources that it needs. When really, if you can look at your relationship with food and realize that, I probably eat more sugar than I should, that relationship's not very healthy. I should cut back on sugar. Same thing with carbs. Gluten really isn't a bad food unless you have celiac disease or a true gluten intolerance. But there's something else in grains called fructans, and those can cause bloating and issues as well. It has nothing to do with the gluten. It's something totally different, but they're both in wheat. And so sometimes when people get rid of gluten, which means getting rid of wheat, they feel better, but it's actually the fructan that was causing the problem. So just being careful about understanding the nutrients and what's going on in your body and what works for you. I can guarantee you what works for your hairstylist isn't necessarily what works for you. But so often we get diet advice and nutrition advice from just our friends and family, and that's not a bad thing. It might be a good place to start. But really coming inside, finding that inner wisdom, the mindfulness that helps to center you around your emotions, and then say, okay, this is actually what works for me. I don't like a lot of meat, or I don't like a lot of grains. And you can adjust your diet accordingly, but keeping it in a balanced way that serves you. And then stop eating when you're full. Just say, I don't have to overdo it, right? So I think those are probably the top two that I would say for kind of those old tales that we tell ourselves around the food that we make. Yeah.
Great. Amber, thank you so much. One of the things I wanted to bring up about this event is we have lots of free, exciting giveaways. Anybody who wants, I have 2 books, The Project Manager and The Consummate Communicator, and they're available free Kindle download all day. And Amber also has some giveaways. Amber, please tell us about your giveaways. So Amber.
Oh, excellent. Yes. So for my giveaways, anyone who is watching this right now, I will take the 3rd comment from the end to PM you and send you a free copy of my book. And then also you can go to my website, and there's a link to my books on my site for both the ebook or the paperback copy of it. And there's a 50% discount on that just for today. So for the whole day during our 24 authors in 12 hours event, you can have the discount. The ebook obviously will go directly emailed to you. You can get started on it today. And then the paperback usually arrives in about 4 to 7 days, depending on where you live. And then if you are interested in knowing more about emotional eating or mindful eating, you can also sign up for a 30-minute strategy call with me. And that's also through my website. Just select book with me on health coaching, and then select the 30-minute strategy call. And I'd be very happy to help you kind of kickstart some ideas that can help you right now. And then the other ideas are obviously in my fabulous book. And you can get that to lead yourself to some better balanced eating in your life.
Amber, I think those are super great things, and I'm so excited. I'm going to actually set up for a consultation myself. But my next question is, what advice do you give on learning mindfulness? And I think we hear that term now, and we think of all these mystic gurus and all this craziness. But I think that when you talk about mindfulness, it's more about being aware of what you want. And I think that's something hard in this like quick paced society. We're just taught like all these kinds of different things. We have all these advertisements. It can be very, very confusing. So I think it's a good question is how do we learn to practice mindfulness?
Okay. Yeah, learning mindfulness is really a personal journey. But the good news is that there is a lot of resources out there right now. And what I think is important to remember is that, mindfulness isn't just, this image of the yogi sitting on the top of the mountain. There's no distractions in the world and just meditating in this perfect Zen state. Mindfulness actually means awareness. It's about paying attention. So you can bring the practice of mindfulness to everything that you do in your day. And the more that you practice it, the easier that it gets. I began meditation because there's ample amounts of research and science behind how it benefits our brain, and it helps our focus, and it does calm our nervous system. It gets us into that parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest nervous system. And that's where we want to spend most of our days. But unfortunately, we spend most of our days in the sympathetic nervous system, that high zone of cortisol and the go, go, go type of nervous system. We want to calm that down. So I meditate just about 15 minutes a day. That's easily to fit into my life. It's just a simple breath connected meditation, but there are a ton of ways that you can meditate. You can find what's right for you. There's even meditation apps to help with that, to be guided or unguided on that. So I have this daily practice of meditating to get myself into that right nervous system for the day. But then if we're talking about paying attention, just keep that idea in mind of pausing and reflecting on what you're doing in the moment. So if you're at work, it's really easy, especially if you've been working the same job for a while, to just, crank it through and type. But you could immediately start practicing mindfulness then by just bringing your attention to, what am I typing? Is that the J key, the K key? It's almost like going back to, elementary school when you started learning to type, right? Like you can slow things down that much to start paying attention to, what are my fingers touching? What does it feel like on my fingers when I'm typing? A great one is just when you're going for a walk, rather than just kind of going through the motions or walking and thinking about all the to-dos you have to get done. You can start walking and thinking about your body. Am I more balanced on one side or the other? Do I swing my legs certain ways? All of this attunes your mind into your body and gets that connection talking. And it helps you when it comes to emotional eating, that you're very in tune with your body. So when you know that you're full, you can stop eating. When you go grocery shopping and you see maybe a trigger food, maybe it's a bag of Oreos, that you know that if you start eating it, you won't stop. But if you listen to your body and you know the difference between physical hunger, actual hunger, and emotional hunger, you might have the awareness at that time then to say, you know what, I don't want the Oreos. I'm not actually really hungry. I'm just sad. And Oreos made me feel better. But there's other ways that I can stop being sad. So that's how mindfulness helps you to make those kind of refined choices around everything in your day. So it's great just to step in, slow down, and start paying attention. That's the easiest way. More information comes out available on the internet. I'm a professional member of the Center for Mindful Eating. They have amazing resources with some guided meditations on their website that can really help you tune in with mindful eating specifically. But just slow down. Try not to move through your life on autopilot. Try to be an active driver in what's happening in your life.
Thank you so much, Amber. I found I was like shifting in my chair and trying to be centered and everything when you were talking. It was like super great. Right now, the reason why we're doing this is because of COVID. COVID has really changed everybody's lives because of the pandemic. We're not going out. Many people, like the restaurants are still shut down. One of the difficulties, though, is when you telework, you have the refrigerator right next to you. So my question for you now is going to be, what advice do you have for those who have difficulty with being by the kitchen all day during the pandemic? So I think that that's a super interesting thing, because I've talked to so many people and they're actually calling it the COVID 15, just like the freshman 15, where, people are just gaining all of this weight because of the pandemic.
Oh, that's a good one. So I
Yeah.
call that the convenience eating, right? So the kitchen is right there. And if you are used to being in an office environment, typically the kitchen is far away, or maybe your office doesn't even have a kitchen, but you would have to get up from your desk. You'd have to walk down a long hallway. Maybe, it has a refrigerator that's shared with everybody's stuff. Like usually there aren't the kind of snack foods that are available to you in your office. And so that's probably the biggest thing that I would say. If you are around your kitchen all day, make sure that the foods that are available to you are nutritious foods, they're nutrient dense, and try to not load up your cabinets or your refrigerator with those tempting foods, the things that when you are emotional, and I think especially in this time of the pandemic, there's a lot of bored eating going on. There's so many places we can't go. There's things we can't do. And so we just kind of wander around the house going, well, what can I do? And then we find ourselves opening the fridge and saying, there's some, ice cream in the freezer. I can eat some ice cream today. So some of what our decisions really now is just out of convenience. It's out of boredom. It's even out of being tired. We're mentally fatigued right now. And sometimes it's hard to just make decisions that make us feel really good. And unfortunately, that's the time when we want to make those decisions. So make it easy for yourself. Keep your house full of nutrient dense food, avoiding putting chips in the pantry and the cookies and just the things that that you can overdo. And maybe this is a good time to point out too, in mindful eating, there's no good and bad foods, but there are sometimes and always foods. So you want to keep those sometimes foods exactly that. Make them sometimes, keep them to a minimum. So if they're a problem with you right now, don't keep them in the house. Make it something that is something you only have when you maybe go to a restaurant or when you're on a road trip or something like that. So that's number one, set yourself up for success in your kitchen environment. And then number two, make sure that you are getting up away from your computer and you're stretching and you're moving. And so instead of taking the time to choose food, go do something else. Sit outside in nature for a little bit. It just takes about 10, 12 minutes to get refreshed and revitalized when you're sitting out in some vitamin D, and the trees give us chemicals that are happiness chemicals. So they boost our endorphins and dopamine. And then think about other things you can do in that time too. Is there a friend you want to call that you haven't talked to in a while? Maybe there's some yoga you've been wanting to do. Maybe there's a book you want to read. There's so many possibilities out there, ways that you can kind of fill time that we don't have to do it with food. So just set yourself up for that success. Make yourself a list of the things that you love to do, so that when you find yourself in that kind of searching mode, what am I going to do right now? I find myself in the kitchen. You can automatically go to a list, and there's a whole list of things that you can just pick one out, and you don't have to even stress about it on your brain because you already did the work.
Yeah, that is super great tips. And I'm going to ask you one more, and this is a bit of a curveball, but I have been sitting here drinking my coffee all morning long. So what about caffeine and alcohol, the two
So
major
caffeine and
dangers?
alcohol. I will admit that the first part of the quarantine, so here's what happens. So our brain gets used to certain rhythms and routines. And for me, I'm not much of a drinker. And so it was usually a Friday evening that I might have a glass of wine or a beer or a margarita or something, because I never saw clients on Saturdays. So Saturday was my true day off. So Friday night was, unwind, let's have a drink of some kind. Or it was social time with friends. Let's have a drink with friends. Well, suddenly my office was closed and every day was a Friday night. So I have wine and I have drinks in my house, and I found myself for about the first week having a drink almost every night. And I'm going, this isn't like me. What is going on? And I made that connection pretty quickly that, oh, it's Friday night every night. So with alcohol, that is something that I would encourage you to take a look at. And, look at what was your past routine. If it was a Friday night thing, can you kind of get back to that Friday night thing? Can you cut it down? I know a lot of people, friends especially, who are drinking wine, just, going through the wine bottles. They're going out and recycling. And, wine in itself actually has some pretty good health benefits to it when it's about 1 glass. And I think it can be 1 glass per day. But ultimately, you are still taking in alcohol, which does have an effect on your liver. So if you want to keep your organs and your whole body as healthy as long as you can, you want to keep that alcohol down to a minimum. Now, caffeine, I will admit something that's probably going to make people go, oh my gosh, no. I don't drink caffeine. I drink decaf, and I actually have my lovely cup of decaf here, which I know I think my dad actually was like, what's the point of decaf? and here's the thing. So I did drink caffeine. I drink a lot of coffee, actually. I lived in the Northwest for a while, and coffee shops, that's where you socialize. That's your way of life. So I drink a lot of coffee, but in my struggle with my stress levels, caffeine doesn't help your body. It maxes out your adrenals. And when the caffeine gets kind of flushed out of your system, you have this crash, which is usually when people, maybe it's around that 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we start to feel really tired and fatigued. And so then we grab for more coffee to get us through the rest of the day. Really, all that is the result of caffeine flooding our system, and then it's worn off. But we can make our own energy. We do. We just can't have the caffeine blocking those receptors. So for me, caffeine was also giving me headaches, very severe headaches daily. So I had to come off of that caffeine, but I still loved the warmth and the smell of coffee. So I went to decaf, and it still gives me that pleasure of drinking the coffee in the morning without all the negative side effects. So I would say with both caffeine and alcohol, understand, again, the way that it affects your body, and then make the adjustments that make you feel the best.
Great. Okay, and it is time for us to wrap up. And our winner right now is Michelle Mraz. I just really, really want to thank you, Amber. This has been a great experience. And we both had this kind of freak out moment because we did not have any access, and we're like, we cannot hear each other. What are we going to do? We've got to go live. We'd both come in and out a few times. And what an amazing experience. And just a testament of authors helping authors working together. Amber, thank you so much. Once again, Amber's book is right here. It is Food, Feelings, and Freedom. And if you look in the comments, you can see Amber's link. Amber, do you have any last words?
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.